Have you ever noticed how one sentence, spoken in the heat of the moment, can create problems that last for years? A single reply, a single argument, a single attempt to prove yourself. Sometimes the fastest way to lose your peace is simply to open your mouth. We live surrounded by noise, quick opinions, endless notifications, arguments where everyone wants to speak and almost no one wants to understand. Every disagreement feels like an invitation to react immediately, as though silence means you've already lost. But what if the opposite is true? The ancient Stoics understood something our modern world has almost forgotten. The people who control their words rarely lose control of themselves. In this video, you'll discover 7 moments when staying silent isn't cowardice. It's one of the highest forms of intelligence. 7 situations where silence becomes your shield, your wisdom, and your greatest source of inner strength. Most people know the first few. Almost no one masters the 6th, and by the 7th, you'll see silence in a completely different way. If you've ever regretted reacting too quickly, explaining yourself to someone determined not to understand, or defending yourself long after the conversation was already over, these lessons can permanently change the way you deal with conflict, pressure, and people. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, once said, "Better to trip with the feet than with the tongue." Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Nothing external can harm you unless you allow it." And Seneca believed silence itself could be a response, sometimes the noblest one. For them, silence wasn't the absence of sound, it was the presence of reason. It wasn't refusing to speak, it was refusing to surrender the steering wheel of your mind to impulse. Today, everyone is encouraged to react instantly. Every notification demands attention, every criticism demands a defense, every opinion demands another opinion. Reflection has become rare. That's why silence has become a quiet advantage. The person who doesn't rush to react often sees what everyone else misses, and that ability changes everything. Situation 1. When you're unfairly criticized. Picture this: you've worked hard on a project at work, only for someone in a meeting to blame you for a mistake you didn't make. Or maybe someone online reads one sentence you wrote and suddenly believes they know your character. Your heart speeds up. Your mind begins writing a defense before they've even finished talking. The instinct to explain yourself feels almost impossible to resist. But Stoicism asks a difficult question. Who are you really trying to convince? Marcus Aurelius observed that if someone insults you, it reflects their judgment, not your character. The Stoic understands that not every accusation deserves a response. Some people don't want understanding, they want a reaction. The moment you begin chasing every misunderstanding, you hand other people control over your peace. That doesn't mean you never speak. If facts genuinely need clarification, state them once, calmly, clearly, without emotion. Then let your actions continue the conversation. Time has a way of exposing both truth and exaggeration. The Stoic trusts that consistency speaks longer than emotion ever can. Integrity practiced quietly becomes evidence that no argument can manufacture. Sometimes your greatest defense isn't a better explanation. It's the life you continue living after everyone else has stopped talking. And that becomes even more difficult when the battle isn't with criticism, but with your own emotions. Situation 2. When anger takes over. Anger rarely announces itself. It arrives disguised as certainty. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A coworker interrupts you. A family member repeats the same disrespect you've tolerated for years. Suddenly, your body changes before your mind does. Your jaw tightens. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your shoulders rise. Your thoughts speed up. At that moment, most people believe they need the perfect response. The Stoics believed they needed something else first. A pause. Epictetus taught that anyone can become angry. Remaining composed while angry, that requires strength. Notice something important. Before anger becomes words, it becomes physical. The body speaks first. Learn to notice it. Feel your breathing. Relax your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. That brief silence creates something incredibly valuable. Choice. Between impulse and response lies the only place where freedom exists. Words spoken in anger often solve today's emotion by creating tomorrow's regret. Silence gives reason enough time to catch up. It doesn't erase anger. It prevents anger from becoming your decision maker. And mastering that pause prepares you for another situation where speaking often becomes a hidden competition. Situation 3. In the face of boasting and self-promotion. Some people walk into every conversation as if they're stepping onto a stage. Mention your weekend and they'll tell you about their expensive vacation. Talk about a small success and they'll immediately describe something bigger. Even on social media, every post seems designed to prove a point. Look how successful I am. Look how important I am. At first, it's tempting to compete, to mention your own accomplishments, to prove you're just as capable. But Stoicism asks a different question. Why does someone feel the need to constantly advertise their value? Seneca observed that excessive boasting often reveals insecurity more than confidence. People who are secure rarely spend much time convincing others that they are. The Stoic notices this without judgment. Not every conversation is an invitation to compete. Sometimes the wisest response is simple attention. Listen, observe. Let the need for comparison pass without feeding it. Real confidence doesn't become smaller because someone else speaks loudly. In fact, quiet confidence often becomes more noticeable beside constant self-promotion. While others work to build an image, the Stoic works to build character. One seeks applause, the other seeks mastery. Only one of those survives when the audience disappears. And once you stop competing for attention, another temptation appears, joining conversations that never create anything worthwhile. Situation 4. In the middle of gossip and rumors. Imagine you're in the break room at work. Someone lowers their voice and says, "Did you hear what happened?" Within seconds, everyone leans in. Or maybe it's a group chat where screenshots begin circulating before anyone knows the full story. Gossip spreads because it offers something irresistible. It makes people feel informed without requiring them to be wise. Rumors move fast because certainty feels exciting, even when it's false. Seneca believed the strongest answer to slander was the integrity of one's life. That's difficult advice in a world where we're told every accusation deserves an immediate response. Sometimes it does. If a false claim can cause real harm, address it once. Clearly, calmly, without turning your entire life into a defense. Then move forward. Endless explanations often give rumors exactly what they need: more attention. Before speaking, ask yourself something uncomfortable. Am I trying to protect the truth, or simply protect my ego? Those aren't always the same thing. Most rumors don't survive contact with consistent character. The truth rarely races. It simply keeps walking while lies grow tired from running. Every minute you refuse to feed gossip is another minute invested in something far more valuable: your own peace. People eventually notice something remarkable about those who refuse to participate in gossip. They become trusted, not because they always speak, because they know when not to. But perhaps the greatest test isn't avoiding rumors. It's remaining calm when someone isn't interested in truth at all. Situation 5. When ignorance speaks louder. Not every disagreement is actually a search for truth. Some are simply battles for the last word. You've probably seen it. Someone keeps interrupting. They ignore every point you make. Each answer you give only gives them another excuse to argue. Maybe it's a stranger online who responds before fully reading what you wrote. Maybe it's a coworker who mistakes volume for authority. Or maybe it's someone close to you who has already decided you're wrong before the conversation even begins. At first you think one better explanation will solve everything, then another, and another. Without realizing it, you've stopped exchanging ideas and started defending your identity. Epictetus warned against wasting energy on arguments that cannot produce understanding. The Stoic recognizes the difference between a conversation and a contest. A conversation seeks clarity. A contest seeks victory. One deserves your attention, the other consumes it. That doesn't mean avoiding difficult discussions. Some disagreements are necessary, but when someone is committed to winning rather than learning, your words stop being tools and become fuel. This is where silence becomes discernment. Stepping away isn't surrender. It's refusing to invest energy where wisdom cannot grow. Protecting your attention is one of the highest forms of self-respect. In a world obsessed with proving itself right, the person who can calmly walk away demonstrates a rarer kind of strength, because the goal was never to win every argument. It was to avoid losing yourself inside one. Most people find that difficult, but there is an even greater test of self-mastery, one that doesn't involve strangers, gossip, or pointless debates. It begins when life itself treats you unfairly. Situation 6. When you face injustice. Few experiences shake us more deeply than being treated unfairly. You do the right thing, yet someone else gets the credit. You tell the truth, yet you're the one who is questioned. You keep your word, while someone who didn't is rewarded. Everything inside you demands an immediate response, not just to defend yourself, to make the other person feel what they made you feel. Marcus Aurelius offered a very different path. The best revenge is to be unlike those who wrong you. At first, those words sound passive. They're anything but. Remaining honorable when someone has treated you dishonorably requires extraordinary discipline. History gives us powerful examples. Socrates accepted an unjust sentence without abandoning his principles. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison and emerged without allowing bitterness to define the rest of his life. Neither confused self-control with surrender. Neither believed silence meant accepting injustice forever. They understood something many people miss. There is a silence that submits, and there is a silence that prepares. The Stoic chooses the second. Before acting, he refuses to let anger decide the direction of justice. That pause protects something more valuable than reputation. It protects character. Wise action almost always begins after emotional reaction has ended. Sometimes speaking immediately satisfies the ego. Waiting allows wisdom to lead. That doesn't mean injustice should never be challenged. It means the challenge should come from clarity instead of revenge. When your values remain intact, even unfair treatment cannot steal the one thing that truly belongs to you, your integrity. And if injustice is one of life's greatest tests, the final situation is often its most personal, because this one targets your pride directly. Situation 7. When you're insulted or provoked, imagine someone insults you in front of other people. Maybe it's a sarcastic remark during a meeting. A stranger leaves a cruel comment online. Someone mocks your appearance, your work, or your character. Almost instantly, your mind begins preparing a comeback. Not because it will improve the situation, because you don't want to look weak. That impulse is exactly what provocation depends on. Epictetus taught that if someone insults you and you become consumed by anger, you've allowed them to influence your inner state. In other words, they didn't just throw the insult, they chose the bait. Your reaction determines whether you take it. Think about the ocean. Storms strike it. Ships cross it. People throw stones into it every day. Yet the sea remains the sea. The surface may ripple for a moment. Its depth remains unchanged. The Stoic aims for that same depth. Not because insults don't hurt, because he refuses to let passing words redefine lasting character. If a response is necessary, keep it brief, calm, respectful. I understand that's your opinion. Then continue with your day. An insult survives on attention. Silence often removes the audience it needs, and that's when many people ask the same question. If I stay silent, won't people think I'm weak? That question has trapped countless people, because we've been taught to confuse the loudest person with the strongest one. But they're rarely the same. The silence we've explored throughout this video isn't fear, it isn't avoidance, and it certainly isn't surrender. It's command. It's the ability to decide when to speak, how to speak, and whether speaking will improve the outcome at all. Anyone can react. Far fewer can remain composed while everyone around them expects a reaction. Don't mistake noise for strength. A falling rock makes a great deal of noise. A river shapes mountains in silence. One demands attention, the other changes the landscape. The same is true of character. The people with the deepest self-control rarely feel the need to prove it. Their confidence isn't built on winning arguments. It's built on governing themselves, and that's something no one else can take away. Here's a simple way to begin practicing today. The next time you're stuck in traffic, the next time a coworker interrupts you, the next time a family member says something that immediately frustrates you, don't answer right away. Notice your breathing. Relax your jaw. Lower your shoulders. Count slowly to 5. Then ask yourself one question. Will speaking right now improve this situation, or am I simply trying to relieve my own emotion? That single question creates space between impulse and action. Sometimes you'll decide to speak. Sometimes you'll decide not to. The important thing is that you made the decision, not your anger, your pride, or your fear. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. People stop getting the reaction they expect from you. The arguments become shorter. The provocations lose their effect. The pressure to explain yourself begins to disappear, not because the world has changed, because you have. You also notice something else. When you speak less, people listen more. Not out of obligation, but because your words are no longer competing with constant reactions. They carry weight. They come from intention instead of impulse. That is one of silence's greatest rewards. It doesn't force influence. It quietly earns it. Now imagine practicing these 7 lessons over the next week. When you're unfairly criticized, let your character continue speaking after the conversation ends. When anger rises, protect the pause before the reply. When others compete for attention, remain focused on building yourself instead of your image. When gossip spreads, refuse to become another voice feeding it. When ignorance argues only to win, recognize that your peace is worth more than the last word. When life feels unfair, let wisdom decide your response before emotion does. And when someone tries to provoke you, remember the sea, deep enough that passing storms cannot change its nature. These aren't abstract ideas, they're daily practices, small decisions repeated until they become character. For more than 2,000 years, Stoicism has endured not because it promises an easier life, but because it teaches a steadier mind. In the end, everything comes down to one question. Who governs your inner world? Other people's opinions, their insults, their praise, their expectations, or you? Stoicism gives the same answer today that it gave centuries ago. Govern yourself first. When you master your own mind, the world loses much of its power to disturb you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't waste time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one." Those words remain just as relevant today. Speaking is easy. Choosing the right moment to speak takes discipline. And every time you practice that discipline, you strengthen something far more valuable than your ability to win an argument. You strengthen your judgment, your character, your freedom, because the person who governs their words gradually learns to govern their life. And the person who masters silence discovers that real strength was never about having the loudest voice. It was about having the calmest mind. If this video made you reflect, I'd like to hear from you. Which of these 7 situations do you find the hardest to stay silent in, and why? Share your answer in the comments. You may help someone else who is facing the same struggle. If you found value in this lesson, subscribe to Stoic Spring for more practical Stoic wisdom that helps you build resilience, discipline, and lasting inner peace. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.